Yeah, I think just being a woman in a wheelchair is easier than being a man for a few reasons. One, I think we tend to weigh less in general, so we're easier to lift. That's not always true, so I'm not trying to make a blanket statement about, how much men and women weigh, but in general, I think women are lighter than men, so we're easier to get around if need be. It's not as awkward, I don't think, for a man to lift a woman if we need to get up the stairs or something like that. Whereas I think it's a little bit more awkward for a woman to lift a man if you're in a relationship, things like that. And then a lot of the things like sex and intimacy, I think, are easier as a woman. But I don't know. Maybe these are all just like pure assumptions that I'm making and judgments that I'm creating based on what I see with my friends. Um, yeah, so I don't know. I just know that I get offered help a lot more than my male friends, and I'm obviously easier to get around than some of them, which I think is helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you make a really good point there, because I've often thought that because if like in relationships, the man is normally the stronger of the two, and he's sort of like the protector and sort of sort of the guardian of the house, the man of the house, and if and also women. When they look for a partner, they choose for height, and being in a wheelchair makes you really short. So I can imagine that for a lot of people, being in a wheelchair would be a deal breaker. But I think that is a blanket statement for male and female. But I think what you're saying is actually a very interesting observation. And yeah, I don't know how I feel about it actually. I think that like I say, like I'm actually in a relationship right now. I'm seeing a girl, but it would be. Like, well, we actually spoke about it. She was like, how much do you weigh? And I was like, I weigh about 65 kilos. She's like, okay, cool. So she's like in the gym trying to squat. Like, she's like, I'm going to try and squat 65 kilos. So if I ever have to like piggyback you somewhere, I can. And I was like, that's so sweet. That's such a lovely goal for her to like try to achieve. But it's also completely, if it was the other way around, I could be like, yeah, I could almost certainly lift her up if I wasn't, in a wheelchair, without going to the gym and like training for it. So yeah, it's interesting. But also I think, so that's like in a sort of like in a relationship, like attracting the opposite sex. I think probably it could be easier being female, but it also is an interesting observation. It's going to sound really weird, but like you and I are pretty easy on the eye. So I think we also have a bit of a pretty privilege as well, like, I can imagine, well, I don't know how to come across this without sounding like a knob, but like, I'm sure there's like people in wheelchairs that don't look like us and be like, wow, man, if I look like those guys, like, I would be flying, through the dating market, and I think that's also important to acknowledge, in a weird way. But yeah, how do you feel about that?
I think that's it's a valid point. And as much as we wish that society wasn't like that, it is. I had a girl once tell me that had polio as a kid and her legs were really deformed. She's a little bit overweight. She said, you have an obligation because people like people in wheelchairs to look normal. They don't like it if, their hands look weird or their legs look weird or their face looks weird. They like it if they look normal, like an able-bodied person just sitting down. And she told me that because I look like a normal person sitting down, then I have an obligation to improve the things for the people that don't necessarily have the pretty privilege. And at first I was a little offended, but then I was like, you know what? If you do have a voice that this culturally accepted, society, like societal norms sort of accept, then maybe we do have an obligation to make things better for other people. But I do think that there are a lot of people in wheelchairs that would look at, the two of us and say like, oh, I just wish I could look like them. And I think it is important to acknowledge. So I'm glad that you said that. Because sometimes it sounds weird when you do acknowledge your privilege. It almost sounds like, I don't know, it's like one of those things that you're like, should I acknowledge my privilege or do I sound like a dick for acknowledging my privilege? Do you know what I mean?
Especially when it's like the pretty privilege. Like, hey, like I know I'm easy on the eye, like so
Yeah.
it's like but it's awkward. But it's kind of true. I definitely know there would be other people in wheelchairs that'd be like, dude, if I look like you, it would be a lot easier. And I do acknowledge that I've been really, really lucky in love since my accident. You know, I've had like things didn't work out with Lou, but then I had a really beautiful relationship last year, which didn't work out. But then I found love again. I'm actually in the middle of a beautiful romance, falling in love with a beautiful girl here in Morzine. And yeah, I've been very, very lucky in love, and I have to acknowledge that. I mean, it's regardless of the wheelchair. So it's actually, yeah.
I sometimes think that the wheelchair, and I always say that, like, I'm wonderfully conspicuous or I'm awesomely conspicuous because I think sometimes the wheelchair helps. I know that that's like an unpopular opinion because people a lot of the times will say that the wheelchair does not help in relationships, but you're easily noticed. You're more noticeable. And I think you stand out in a crowd. We stand out in crowds when we're in wheelchairs. And if we do have the pretty privilege or, at least the like pretty average privilege, of how we look, then I think that we're standing out above, other people that have to fight their way to get attention. And so sometimes I think that the wheelchair is not actually a liability in that regard. I think that it's helping draw attention to our personalities and our good looks or whatever it is that we think that we have that are assets. I think it's drawing attention to those things. And I've certainly not had any problems finding love or, have had any shortage of people hitting on me or anything like that. I don't know what it would be like to be able-bodied and go back because I've been paralyzed for so long. So I'm not sure if I had like a comparison of, I got hit on more before or after. I'm not sure, but I certainly don't feel like I've been left out of that arena for sure. So yeah.
Absolutely. I also find this is an interesting observation, but I find if a girl is attracted to me, she'll make it a little bit more obvious because I'm in a wheelchair, just to basically be like, hey, just so you know, I'm okay with the chair, like, and I know that sounds really weird, but like I have had girls flirting with me. Like, for example, there was a lifeguard at the pool, and she was flirting with me like a little bit, and I was like, is she flirting with me? I don't know. And then she asked me out, and I was like, okay, cool. Well, then she definitely was flirting with me. But this was like a sort of 3 out of 10 on the flirting scale. I just saw her every day, and we'd say, hey, and then she just said, hey, do you want to go for a beer? And I was like, oh, cool. And then I was like, oh, so she was flirting with me. So yeah, it's interesting. Very interesting observation.
Oh, I was just gonna say, as a Canadian woman, your accent definitely doesn't hurt. For some reason, in North America, we cannot get enough of Aussie accents and the UK, anything like that, like where you guys have, it's just those two, really. Like, if you're from Britain or like Australia, North American girls are like, oh my God. I don't know why we love to listen to your voices so much.
I had that experience when I did a ski season in Lake Tahoe many, many years ago now. And I had that. I was just talking, and the girls were like, "Oh," I was like, "Oh my God, I've never had this before in my life. It's like being a celebrity." I'll just talk, and they were very forthcoming, and I was, again, that was a great time in my life. It was.
I don't know what it is about it. I was just listening to your podcast yesterday, and it's just the way you guys like this, like even the like this, I don't know, what am I trying to say, like the words that you use and stuff are like interesting, and I guess they're just cute. They're like something cute about it. And when you like,
what you mean, like the vocabulary, the lingo?
Yeah, the vocabulary, that's what I was trying to say. Like the vocabulary you guys use. I'm trying to think of a specific like word. I'm trying to think of something specific, but I can't right now just because my brain is like totally blanking. But yeah, it's and
tea and biscuits.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just cute. It's like Cute, yeah.
Hello, friends. If you enjoyed that little clip, I'm going to be releasing the next part of the conversation very soon. So if you haven't subscribed already, just click here. Till next time, peace.